informed and better able to participate in democracy.
We're aiming to change the future of American journalism by giving women and the LGBTQ community the platform and the voice that they deserve.
There's never been a better moment than right now.
The 19th is the newsroom that we've been waiting for.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Live with the 19th. I'm Amanda Zamora, co-founder and publisher of the 19th, an independent nonprofit newsroom that aims to empower you with the information, resources, and community you need to be equal participants in our democracy. Women and LGBTQ+ people have served in the U.S. military for generations, but until very recently, they've been barred from leadership roles and from serving openly as their whole selves. Today, the 19th is exploring what a modern, inclusive military looks like and why it matters. How is the Biden administration thinking about gender inclusivity? What is the military doing to combat sexual assault in its ranks? And how are veterans finding the support they need when they return home? Before we get started, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Raytheon Technologies. Marie Silla Dixon, Chief Diversity Officer at Raytheon Technologies, will share a few words.
Hello and welcome. I'm Marie Silla Dixon, Chief Diversity Officer for Raytheon Technologies, and it's our pleasure to sponsor this latest installment of Live with the 19th, Gender Equality in the Military. On the eve of our national celebration of Veterans Day, we're looking forward to today's conversation about the ways policymaking impacts the lives of our service members, both active duty and veterans, including our veterans within Raytheon Technologies. To our esteemed panelists, thank you for your service and commitment to equity in the armed forces and to ensuring that those who serve receive the care and respect they deserve. I am particularly grateful for all you do to uplift and amplify the voices and interests of the scores of women over the years, whether enlisted formally or not, who have found a way to play a critical role in our national defense. We see you, we celebrate you, and we thank you. Dating back to the Revolutionary War, wives, sisters, daughters, and mothers traveled with soldiers who were fighting on the front lines, tending their wounds, foraging and preparing food, and helping to clean equipment, even when formal law and policies wouldn't allow them to enlist. Women have always found a way to serve. Over time, as national ideas about equity and equality evolved, women have continued to expand their service and today make up 16% of our nation's armed services across all branches. At Raytheon Technologies, our belief in women and their power to change lives and entire industries is being borne out in our ever-evolving diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. We're committed to creating a culture of belonging that's deeply rooted in establishing collaborative environments where everyone feels safe, valued, respected, and included. And we will continue to take an informed approach to executing our strategic pillars for action, supporting our workforce by cultivating a culture of inclusion and innovation, driving economic empowerment through enhancements to our supplier diversity practices, championing equality through public policy advocacy, and strategically investing in the communities we serve to create sustainable social impact. As we continue to advance our efforts, we remain grounded in the belief that people must be seen and heard, and we understand just how much representation matters. That's why events like these and partnerships with esteemed organizations like the 19th matter. They helped us connect, unearth, and elevate stories that matter, and imagine our way toward a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable society. Thank you all for being here today to take part in this crucial conversation. And to all the members of our armed services, especially our veterans, we appreciate you and we owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude. Have a wonderful day.
A quick reminder that while sponsors and donors help to keep Live with the 19th free for viewers to attend, they play no part in the programming of our events. As our conversation kicks off, we hope you'll share what resonates with you on social media using the hashtag the19thlive. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our free newsletter, you can do that now at 19thnews.org/subscribe. You can find out about upcoming 19th News events, read our journalism, and more. Now, I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished panel. Captain Deshauna Barber is the CEO of Service Women's Action Network, a nonprofit organization advocating on behalf of servicewomen and women veterans. She's also an Army Reserve commander and a former Miss USA. BriGette McCoy is the CEO and founder of the Women Veteran Social Justice Network, whose work received the 2020 Community Service Award from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. An Army veteran who served in the Gulf War, she's currently getting her Ph.D. at Georgia State University. Skelly is the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness. She served on active duty in the U.S. Navy for 20 years as a naval flight officer and retired with the rank of commander. In 2018, she co-founded Out in National Security to increase LGBTQ representation in the military. Lourdes Tiglau is the director of the Center for Women Veterans within the Department of Veteran Affairs. Previously, she was the Global Partnerships Manager at Airbnb's Open Homes program. She's a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. And from the 19th, General Assignment reporter Mariel Padilla will be leading today's conversation. Mariel?
Well, thank you everyone for being here today to have this important conversation about military and gender.
Hi, thank you so much. Well, I served in the during the Gulf War era, in the end of the Cold War, 1987 through 1991. I was a data telecommunications systems operator.
So I am going on 11 years in the U.S. Army Reserve. And probably what pushed me to join is my parents. My father and my mother were both service members, and they actually met at Fort Benning in Georgia, which is where I was born. My dad was a drill sergeant, mom was a truck driver. And it was really pushed into us that, you know, serving this country would be something that's very important to our family. It became a tradition for our family because myself and both my siblings actually ended up joining the Army right after high school. My father, mother, sister, brother, and stepmother are all Army veterans. So it is something that we take very seriously in terms of service. And it became a huge part of my life after college. I commissioned to be a second lieutenant to the Quartermaster Corps. And I've just been doing logistics and a logistician ever since for the past 11 years. I have transitioned though over to Howard University as a cadre member. And it is there that I help train the future officers of the world. These young men and women that have committed to a military scholarship go on after graduation to commission as second lieutenants in the Army Reserve or active duty or the National Guard, whichever they choose. And it is a great part of my life.
So I was commissioned in 1988. I served for a little over 20 years on active duty. I was a Pacific Fleet sailor based out of San Diego. So I did multiple deployments into the Pacific and to the Persian Gulf. And I also did deployments around South America and into the Eastern Atlantic and the Mediterranean, as well as served on staffs across the United States.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I enlisted actually back in 96 and got out in 07. I was in the Air Force for a little bit under 12 years. I was on a critical care air transport team, and I had various deployments across Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and my last duty station was actually in Okinawa, Japan.
So we're just going to start the conversation with a broad question. What are some of the challenges that women and LGBTQ plus service members face?
What are challenges that the LGBTQ community face? So there's a few, or probably more than a few. Well, one in general is just discrimination. I think that that is a general piece of people that are different and they're walking into an organization that kind of stems from an older history. I think that the LGBTQ community, there is an adjustment after the don't ask, don't tell portion of service. And it's really just making sure that there is this almost debunking going on when they walk into an organization. I think that it is incredibly important, especially when it comes to doing a reversal on some things that has been put into place when it comes to allowing transgender men and women to be able to have access to even wanting to join the service. And for those that are going through the transition within their service, making sure that they do not have to deal with the discrimination, they don't have to deal with sexual harassment or assault, that they are welcomed within the uniform. For myself as a service member, I think that it's been very interesting because I just actually did a fireside chat with someone that's a part of the LGBTQ community, and she actually went through her transition during her service after well over 15 years within service. And it was really just trying to get people to see her as the same, the uniform as the same, and not looking to the surgery and these things that are going on as a way to hinder a person's service. So there has been a lot of misconceptions when it comes to especially transgender service members and just the cost of the medical costs and things along those lines. So it is because of mostly that singular issue where people question whether or not those within the transgender community should be able to join the military. And quite frankly, I just think it's very unfortunate that that's the first thing that we think of. For myself, when a person is in uniform and they're willing to put their lives on the line for this country, I think that's an honorable thing. And I don't believe that anybody should be discriminated against because of their decisions to transition and become who they truly are. I think it's incredibly important that we look at service members the same and that we honor their decision to want to even put their lives on the line for the American dream and for this country.
Well, some of the challenges that women who serve in the military face have to do with some of the gender biases related to them not being able to serve at the same capacity as their male counterparts, which we know that is not true. Some of the other challenges would we find, but within both male and female, but specifically more within the women sector, is sexual assault and harassment, again, based on their gender. Some of the other challenges would be getting the appropriate opportunities to advance. And I think that those are some of the core challenges that we experience. As a Black woman, I also experienced, race-based challenges. So some racism on top of the sexism, on top of the challenges with not respecting kind of the opportunities to advance. So those were some of the just very general challenges that women face.
I think I'd like to second most of what BriGette had to say. I'll second all of it, actually. Our military is a reflection of our society, and it's only in the last several years that our population has been fully enabled to participate in the military and truly represent the American people. We're just underway in that sort of process to ensure that all of America's talent is brought to bear in service of America. And we're talking about a multi-century old organization with roots that go back to before America was even a country. And so we have a lot of the baggage that comes with that. There are cultures that are literally hundreds of years old at play, as well as subcultures that are less aged. But however, we have a long history of women and other kinds of minorities being represented in the force. Women are not a minority in humanity, right? However, they're a minority just by numbers within this organization, and that brings challenges. Though I think the way that we're pointed in terms of representation and continually expanding leadership and examples of what anybody are capable of. A person's origins and who they are isn't determinative as to what they have to offer any organization, let alone the US military in that way. So I think the challenges are real, but the challenges are also being directly addressed and they're being lowered.
Yeah, I'll say I'll third everything that's been said so far. I think that one of the things that is really important to think about is also that policies are changed with administrations, and certain policies can be added or rescinded depending on the administration, and that really makes an inconsistent military force because they apply different policies depending on the year. And so I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have is having a consistent policy that's inclusive of the diverse population, as Sean had said, then just a diverse population and a diverse workforce actually helps our nation's strength, not only as a military force, but also in our national security. I mean, the fabric of America is made of so many different people from diverse backgrounds. And so having that understanding and that lived experience is important in order for us to be able to tackle the challenges, not only within the constructs of where we're engaging now, but also in the future.
And when it comes to discrimination in the military, what does that look like? Can you provide any examples or elaborate a little bit on what that might look like?
Discrimination within the military can come in a few forms. It can come through opportunities, and when you're moving up the rank system, it is those opportunities that increase your chances of being able to achieve a certain rank. So for example, I'm a commander and I want to go to the next rank. There might be other people within my unit that did not get the opportunity to acquire that specific command position that would have increased their chances of being able to move up to a different rank. So it can come in terms of opportunities. It can also come just in the way you're treated when you walk into your unit, the way that people speak to you, the way that people that address you. Being a double minority, I've had my fair share of instances where I'm being discriminated against or spoken to a certain way because I'm a Black woman. And that in itself can be very tough. But one thing I will say is I see a lot of changes being made within the military. And I think that my work as CEO of a nonprofit, a women veterans nonprofit, has really shown me just the power that we have to be able to make changes within Congress, and then that being able to shift over into how the military operates and how the DoD operates.
Going back to what Sean was talking about with the progress that has been made, it's only been since 2011 that LGBTQ plus people have been able to openly serve in the military. Women have only been eligible to apply for combat jobs since 2014. So do you feel like significant progress has been made in 10 years? And where do you kind of see us going in the future? And Sean, could you kind of speak to that?
I believe progress is really being made, but I think we also, and I'll go back into I'll second what Lourdes had to say about policies, and that policy consistency is a thing that is really important because that's how you build momentum. And so many of the changes that are becoming effective and are really generating impact take generations to bear fruit. It's only been 10 years since the enactment of the policy, for, the reversal of don't ask, don't tell, so LGBTQ people can serve out openly. It's only been barely 5 years since trans people could transition and serve as their authentic selves. And you're right, it's just a little over 5 years since ground combat positions were open to women to qualify for and serve in. However, we do know that in 1993, other combat positions, air combat positions, were open to women. And guess who we're seeing now as the 4-star combatant commanders? Just in the last month, we had 2 of them, the second and third. The first was General Lori Robinson several years ago. Now we have General Jacqueline Van Oost and General Laura Richardson are now both new 4-star combatant commanders, and they're aviators because they've had those nearly 30 years in their professions to advance and be promoted up based on their performance within their specialty, because we know that the senior military ranks were predominantly filled with people in combat-related combat specialties. Right now that ground combat is beginning to open up and women can qualify that, in, granted so far in small numbers, but they continue to qualify and successfully serve. The first women officers who qualified to become Army infantry leaders are now majors. And that's a process that takes time because those people perform, they destigmatize the place of those people in those organizations, they prove themselves, and they also serve as examples to others to follow in their footsteps. So those tides are shifting, but they are generational, and that's just a realistic nature of our forces. In many ways, we want to learn from the rest of society, but because it takes so long to become experienced enough to be considered to be a leader, some of these things take time, but they do bear fruit and they serve as examples and almost magnets for people to be drawn into those challenges.
Well, I exited the military in the early 90s. And so what most people don't recognize is that some of the changes, and I do have to agree with Sean and Lourdes, some of the changes are going to definitely take generations. Changes in the VA didn't happen until the bills and the laws were changed until the 90s for gender-based care. That's the 1990s when I got out of the military. And so we're looking 30 years later and still having some of these same conversations about, military service and how, how those impacts are going, how those things are going to impact going forward. We do definitely need some research to, be able to quantify like what is happening, what those true outcomes are, what the true inputs are that are creating those outcomes. And so from that perspective, it's going to take, the appropriate funding, as Lourdes talked about, some of the policies, some of these policies that are put in place don't always have, when it's gender-based, the same types of funding that our male counterparts have as it relates to, what the outcomes are going to be on the other end. So, when women take these positions, what is their health going to be like? What are their mental health going to be like? What are, the lives of the people that they are leading? How is their lives being impacted by seeing women in leadership? So all of these things create other areas for, to explore and to have discussion and to research. And so I would, want to present that as a area of discussion or, exploratory, vision for anyone to have the conversation, to begin to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think I'll echo everything that everyone said. The other side that actually we've made some quite a bit of progress on is, aside from just opening up the different roles, it's also the support that women get from going into those roles. Thinking about uniforms, thinking about some of the packs that you have to carry. I mean, it used to be that it was a cookie cutter approach. Everyone gets the same thing. No matter who you are, how tall you are, there's only this small range. But now there's a bit more thoughtfulness in how the military approaches that. And I think that is a significant shift in mentality of how I think the military really recognizes the differences in the military workforce. So I'd say that the support from not just from the roles that people take, but also in the support that they get after they get out.
I've seen a few things. I've seen women that have been able to go through and become rangers. I have seen women that are able to apply for combat positions. I have seen people be able to walk around in uniform as their true selves and be a part of the LGBTQ community and not feel as though they might run the risk of being kicked out of the military due to who they are. So there's been a few changes. I think that we're really just moving as an organization out of this very, what's the word? The organization in itself comes from a place that's very traditional. And with some levels of a traditional mindset, it can be very discriminatory. It can be very closed-minded, and anything different scares people. So I think that in the military, as we shift and move through recognizing that Americans come in all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds. And having that open-minded mentality is incredibly important to being a more welcoming organization. The military that my mother and my father served in is not the one that I'm serving in right now. It is shifting to an organization that's welcoming, and it's shifting to an organization that I believe is more open-minded to who a service member is and what they look like. Even myself, coming from a background that's been quite unique, I've been in the pageant world. So, being able to balance pageantry and serving in this country back in 2016 was definitely a unique thing. Being able to see a soldier that's in uniform one day and a gown the next day, it's a little different. But I think that you have trailblazers that are going through and they're knocking down some of these stereotypes and these boxes that people are placed in. And we're really just showcasing the value of creating an organization that's open to all types of people. And I think that's really just what the American dream represents, is people that look different, that act different, that come from different spaces. And if that is what an American is, and that is what an American soldier is as well.
Great. And can you elaborate a little bit on the importance of diversity in the military and why that might be a better goal to have more inclusive policies? And then follow up to that, what kinds of things do you think that the U.S. military could or should be doing?
Diversity is incredibly important. If you walk out into most communities in this country, there are people that all look different, come from different backgrounds, have different experiences. And I think that if we are going to be an organization that serves these people, that serves this community, we need to look like the community that we serve. We all know, well, I don't know if we all know this, but when it comes to the military, we're looking for diversity in higher ranks when it comes to those within the officer corps. So myself being at a historically Black college university as a cadre member, our goal is to create more minority officers within the Army because we're serving a community of minorities. So to me, it's incredibly important for the service members to be reflective of the community that we serve. And if we are serving a diverse community, then we all need to be diverse. We need to be able to have the same faces that the people we hope will trust us when we are overseas protecting the values of this country, of this nation. So to me, it's incredibly important. I think the secondary piece to that is what the military can do to expand on introducing more policies that allow minorities to be able to move up the ranks. It is really turning to historically Black college universities. It is turning to universities that have a high minority population and going into these schools and giving them the resources and the information that they need to know that the military is an option, that this is a career field where you can thrive. Unfortunately, when you see a lot of where these larger programs exist, it is oftentimes at a predominantly white institution. And that can really shift and change the numbers. If these ROTC programs are bigger at predominantly white institutions and not at historically Black college universities or at other universities that have a high minority population, you are obviously running the risk of having a higher population of non-minority officers. So diversity in itself is incredibly important. And just the opportunity itself. I come from a family where being in the military is common, but a lot of my friends and family who are people of color don't have that same experience. They have absolutely no exposure to the military. They've never thought of the military as an option, nor have they been contacted or been in a place where the military has offered them opportunities. So to me, I think it's incredibly important. And diversity in itself is great for any institution or any organization to take seriously.
And kind of continuing this thought of progress made in the military, let's talk about the culture. how would you characterize the culture?
Whenever I'm asked about military culture, one of the first things I offer, and it took me a while to truly understand it over the course of my 20-year military career and the dozen plus years since I left, but I've still been associated with the Department of Defense in various ways over that time. Military is not a singular culture. We can think of it that way, but it's really, we have service cultures, we have subcultures based on specialties within the services. It's a really complex ecosystem of cultures in that way. But the one thing we know is that any successful culture is a learning one that adapts and evolves. And the only way that happens is through leadership. The only positive way that happens is through leadership. One thing I'm proud of to be part of the department today is the priority that the senior most leadership, from the secretary to the deputy secretary to the chairman of the joint chiefs and the service chiefs, have all put on understanding continually that people are what makes everything go. And they have to appreciate all of our people in that way. There's often a lot of discussion when it comes to Defense Department budgets, how expensive people are. In some respect, I think they should be expensive because they're the most precious asset America has is our people. And the people that we put into national security and the military are the difference makers for us. Yes, our technology and equipment matter, but it's the people who design it, who acquire it, who maintain it, and who operate it in that way. And the more we appreciate our people and support them, the better we can do. And our culture is representing that and recognizing that all with greater emphasis all the time. And it's really impressive to me. And I understand I'm seeing that as an Assistant Secretary of Defense currently serving. But at the same time, it's certainly not the Department of Defense I joined, nor the one I left 20 years after that. I like to think definitely not perfect, made up of human beings who are as frail as anybody else in that way and imperfect. But when it starts with, as Lourdes mentioned, policies that set the expectations for enforcement and the expectations of the leaders as well to be held accountable for how they conduct themselves in their organizations. So I think culture can be a pernicious thing that gets really dug in. And the first thing we do when we recognize that it could be better, and virtually every one of our cultures and subcultures could be better, and leaders, the way we hear leaders explicitly talk about to that point today is really encouraging to me. So while I don't think it's a perfect culture and one that's, again, rooted in centuries of tradition, I think all the senior leaders agree that it has to be smarter and more appreciative of everything that everybody as an individual can bring to bear for the collective common good.
Great. BriGette, do you have anything to add to that conversation, especially given your perspective from being in the military years ago?
Yes, so I absolutely agree with Sean. I love this panel. It's amazing because I can just kind of interject a few points and move on because they are so thorough in explaining a lot of the concepts and ideas. I know with culture, from the military perspective, we don't necessarily get into discussions when you're putting on the uniform related to, intersectionality of the identities of the people who are serving. But just because they put on the uniform, we train that once you put the uniform on, that you're that body. But within that body, each person is carrying a unique active perspectives of different ideas, and they come with different history. And so they bring that into the military. And so sometimes those things linger, right? And we've seen some wonderful changes within the military. The idea that the hair was a big issue, especially when I was serving. There was a lot of challenges with, especially people of color, Black women, having challenges with, maintaining the responsibility of their hair based on the regulations. And so those changes came forward. As I think Lourdes or Sean was speaking about the uniform changes, that them being more tailored for women, based on your size, height, and weight. I mean, that's a safety factor. Those are things that are very important to the workforce. And so that was a change in people seeing the value in changing those things, because initially it was like, just put on a boot, it doesn't matter. And then we had to have like a shift in people's ideas about women serving and the importance of protecting, women during during their service, and making sure that they're prepared appropriately. And so those things were a mental cultural shift. And then the other part I would like to talk about is also the mental health piece. I think before, and we joke about it as military service, prior service people, they just give you a Motrin and say, go out there, drink water, and change your socks. And now it's a greater conversation about how to to be aware of the people that are serving, their emotional and mental health, and paying very close attention to it, and making it an important part of the conversation when you're in leadership. And so I think that shifts. I think personally that anyone could be supportive of people from a mental health perspective, but I think women who are in leadership are especially positioned to have an insight in paying attention to those areas and being able to usher in those changes in a way that's going to significantly and positively impact those who are serving.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that I'll add to that, at least I can definitely say for myself, that serving in the military definitely forces you to move past your own preconceived notions of your limits. And so it's been super helpful with overcoming any barriers or obstacles that we face in our day-to-day lives now. However, I think that one of the things that is a lingering aspect within military culture is still there's a celebration of toxic masculinity, and it puts camaraderie and esprit de corps at risk, especially for integrated units. And I will say that the military culture has come a long way from the old environment where help-seeking behavior was considered a weakness. However, more needs to be done around cultural sensitivity. Both Sean and BriGette talked about it already, that it's not the same military that we entered, but there's definitely more that can be done. And one thing that I really liked that BriGette talked about was specifically that everyone brings in their own flavor of their lived experience. And while it's important to work as a unit, it is our individual differences that actually makes us stronger. And so I think that within the military, we recognize that that it's a team. It's not an individual, but it's the individuality of people that makes it strong. And I think I'll end with that one.
BriGette, you brought up mental health, which was actually going to be my next question. There is an alarming rate of suicides among service members. Right now, recent numbers have shown that more have died domestically than in combat. And when it comes to women specifically, studies have shown a clear connection between mental health issues and sexual trauma. So as someone who works with veterans and in this space, are there any solutions? What do you think can or should be done to address this problem?
So there are multiple levels to how we can approach supporting, if you're talking about post-military or currently serving. Lourdes and Sean have brought into the conversation on many different points about the mental health and the changes that are happening. Some of the changes as it relates to military sexual trauma, we're gonna have to move things forward in a much greater way. There are still, sexual violence is still happening in the military. It did not stop because we said, because leadership said don't do it. And so those are going to be things that are going to impact men and women, but since we're talking about women specifically, that's going to definitely impact women staying in the military. The RAND report that just came out in November talks about how the great number of women who exit the military due to a sexual trauma or harassment within the first 24 to 28 months of their serving. And so, this makes this a security issue. This makes this keeping troops in the service issue. This creates another issue on the back end where, people are getting out of the military and they're injured, and then they're having to, seek some help and then try to manage getting into work. And so the workforce is being impacted by this. And so it's not just one layer of negative social impact. It's multiple layers. And then when you add in the next generation, which, most of our men and women are serving and they have children. It's impacting that next generation as well. So we have to look past, we have to think of this as, a national security, a public health, and definitely from a public health perspective, within our social construct, a issue impacting mental health and suicide, especially within our population. I mean, it's not even being appropriately counted, because we're not getting the numbers of women saying that it's suicide specifically. Most of it is just saying, we're just getting reports that someone passed away. It may have been, because of their medications. It may have been because of other things. So I want to see more specific, again, research directly related to women who served. Not men and women who served, but women who served and women who are currently serving as it relates to mental health. And it needs to have a different framework. The way that we're doing research as it relates to women is the framework needs to be more of a feminist or women-centered research, because we're still using tools and methodologies that were designed by men, and the language that was put in place by men to describe the experiences that women are having. And so it requires a little bit of an overhaul of like how we calculate and quantify and question and describe, and and then what that means on the other end of how we shift, changing how we do things in support of mental health and sexual trauma. Personally, like I said, I served in the 90s. I can say that there have been improvements, but even in that phase, it's not enough of an improvement for us to see a positive effects that we need to see for us to really support those in the military currently serving and those who have exited the military and in the civilian sector.
Lourdes, would you like to weigh in, given your work with the Center for Women Veterans?
Yeah, absolutely. And BriGette actually makes a lot of great points. So thank you for raising those. There is definitely a lot of things that still needs to be done, but there are steps that have been getting done. One, just the existence of the Center for Women Veterans. That is not something that every nation adopts for their veterans. And so I'm very proud that our nation does, that we prioritize women since 1994, the center's been in existence. I will say that though there has been different initiatives and campaigns like the Be There campaign that the VA does, and we have instituted like trauma-informed approaches through engagement with VA, there are definitely pockets that still needs to be addressed, because not all the information always filters down to the most local level where women veterans are engaging in particular. I think that for something that's as large as this, that really touches various aspects of society, it can't be just one organization or one agency or two agencies that approaches this. This is really a whole of society, because women, veterans, military women, we don't engage in silos. We are part of the fabric of this nation. And so I think that the education and the way that we support those who have experienced these traumas needs to have a wider stakeholder and breadth of education, as well as being able to just identify the women veterans who are suffering just by being able to see the signs.
Recently, there's been a lot of shifts within the military on how it is that the organization is going to handle sexual assault. The real shifting point was the murder of PFC Vanessa Guillen at Fort Hood last year. And it was because of that specific situation that, thanks to the Guillen family, they are and have been consistently pushing for there to be a shift within how it is that sexual assault claims are handled. Oftentimes, and previous to some things that have been shifting around, is you would go through your chain of command, and that can be problematic because what if the person that is harassing you or assaulting you is a part of your chain of command? So there's a few things where we want to, one, as an organization, there needs to be a prevention of retaliation. And if in fact you're going to a person as a victim and they might be the person you're accusing of these acts, that can be problematic because then within the military, it's all about family, looking for your battle buddy to your left, to your right. So now it creates a very retaliatory space for a woman or man that's walking into their unit. And now everyone thinks that you are the person that is causing a rift within the unit because you are accusing this person of doing something. So one, we want to make sure that when you are pushing or you are saying someone has assaulted me, someone has done this to me, that you don't necessarily have to go to the person that might have done this to you. That's one. Two is we want to create a space where you get to retain your privacy so that you don't have to worry about retaliation. So what they're doing right now is they're looking to look to a third party to be the organization that's able to do the investigations on sexual assaults and sexual harassments. That prevents a lot of things. One, again, retaliation. And then two, making sure that we can keep the victim away from the person that's victimizing them. So it can be a few different things. When it comes to mental health within the military, the VA, making sure that the VA has the resources that they need to be able to provide everything that a soldier needs or a veteran needs when it comes to having the resources to be able to heal and get through those invisible scars. That can be a little problematic, especially for veterans that are in rural areas and don't necessarily have access to a VA within 50 miles of where they live. That's kind of the bigger issue, is really demographically, where are you located? When you go to the East Coast or when you go to the South, you have way more access. Like I'm from DC, so there's about 5 or 6 bases and at least 4 or 5 VAs within 50 miles of each other. But if I'm off in North Dakota, that's definitely not the case. So one thing that I believe the military needs to do is make sure that they increase the amount of VA branches around the country, and making sure that those that don't have access to a VA can maybe go through a civilian party to be able to get the resources and the help that they need. So if there isn't a VA within 50 miles, then maybe there's a civilian doctor that this soldier can go to be able to get, the service that they're looking for. So it's a few different things, but I think those primarily is the main thing, is making sure that they have VA access, and then also the VA backlog. You have a lot of people that have been waiting to be served or waiting to speak with someone, waiting to have access, waiting for an appointment, and you're looking at 6-7 months before they'll even be able to reach a person that can help them with what they need. So the VA backlog is also a huge issue. I could probably go down a list, but I think those are probably the top things I can think of.
Thank you. Sean, as someone who is working currently as the Assistant Secretary of Defense, what do you think priorities are? How are you kind of thinking about how to address this issue?
Well, first, the White House recently released a new strategy on military and veteran suicide prevention, a strategy that is interagency, and not to say that just the executive branch of the federal government is the solution, but I think it's the approach that there are all these different opportunities for support, as well as interdiction of people when they are on the path towards this type of self-harm in all sorts of different ways that I don't believe we've adequately understood. I certainly haven't really understood the appreciation of all the things that come into bear, and how often we have or go unnoticed the opportunities to intercede. and to offer people the opportunity to find help, not just seek it, but to actually find it and receive it at the time when they need it most. Because often there are signs, there are indicators that are observed, that are actually observed, but they're not recognized in that way. And we have to continually improve our understanding of what it is that leads people to be in these places where they feel that they have no further recourse in that way. That DoD is a part of that is something I'm glad for. At the same time, I think some of the things that are well to the left in terms of a continuum sense of how people wind up in those positions and some of the stresses that are imparted upon them. The Department of Defense feels really positive about leading work that the Army has done with screening its commanders. It started at the battalion level of command. It's moved up to look at the selection of colonels and begin to look at those people and see how they are as leaders of people, not just high-end performers that achieve their combat goals and they have high marks throughout their career, but how are they as leaders of people and how do they appreciate what it means to be responsible for a duty of care of not just service members, but their associated families and dependents that are out there. That's a program and approach that is being considered for wider use across the Department of Defense in the armed services. I think it starts there is how we treat our people and how we understand our responsibility for them as leaders, as civilian leaders and as uniformed leaders. That's where those stresses are imparted. That's how those negative behaviors are perpetuated under the supervision, whether witting or unwitting, of leaders at all levels, to include small unit enlisted leaders, senior enlisted leaders, senior officer leaders, all the way through, to understand that that's as important as their mission accomplishment and their readiness goals as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for readiness. I look at those numbers, and I have people look at those numbers across the whole department. Are you ready to fight tonight if that's your assigned job? The only way we ever get to those numbers and we get to true readiness to do our mission on behalf of the department and the American people is if our people are best cared for within the fullest ability of the resources and the responsibilities we've been given. To understand that it starts with the people and then it ends with the people, and then everything else is possible. So I think we're not resting on our laurels. We know that we lose one loss is too many. We lose more people to suicide than we do to accidental injuries in the Department of Defense. That's really moving to me as someone responsible for safety within the Department of Defense. And our policies continue to evolve. The leadership charge to leaders to get after it and to do better, to do it differently and to do it better. Advanced by science, I believe BriGette's point about we have to do a better job of understanding what's going on in advancing the research. The old ways of counting ourselves and looking for factors are not sufficient. And I think the work that Lourdes and the veterans in the Department of Veterans Affairs does is critical in that, because we have to understand the veterans that we make. Department of Defense makes veterans. We have to understand that the people that are being dealt with by Veterans Affairs just don't pop up. They're created by the Department of Defense. And I think the work that's going on to make the departments more connected at a ground level is pretty critical and to help shifting that tide.
Kind of wrapping everything that we've talked about, what do you think the military can, or what is the military currently doing to attract and retain a more diverse group of people? And what is the importance of inclusivity when it comes to recruitment and retainment and culture? That's kind of a big question, but we can start with BriGette.
Yeah, that's a huge question. I think that one of the things that I loved about being in the military, because I'm a tech person, was that technology advancements that are always happening within the military. And so with this, this next generation who are digital natives, they were born and breastfed on, technology. So the military is always going to have an opportunity to, bring in the next generation of leaders because of the technological opportunities. The next thing is, like everyone has said, just the culture shifts, some of the changes I've seen like the hair changes, the tattoo changes, like all of these things, making it available for more people to be interested in, coming into the military or choosing it as an option. And it not just being something that it's a, last ditch kind of a idea of serving, I have nothing else to do, I might as well go in. No, these are highly skilled, opportunities for highly skilled and very well prepared people to decide that the military is somewhere that they would like to invest their intellectual property, their ideas, their work ethic, to make the military better and stronger. The other area is that women are increasingly going into the military of all races, all backgrounds, all gender identities, like people are going into the military. And so I think that because of the law, the changes in the laws and the changes in the policies is going to make for a more diversified military. It was great to hear Sean speak about like some of the changes within the leadership and how the leadership selection is going, because then that's going to also reinforce some of these changes versus bringing in people at such high levels and then having them leave within a 2 or 3 year period and not continue their service. So I'm hopeful and cautiously optimistic about some of these changes. But the big thing is going to definitely be the culture related to military sexual trauma, our work. I call it workplace violence because to me, the military is a workplace. And so if we, fully change some of the language that we use related to some of the things so that it doesn't feel so siloed related to the military and then related to being a civilian. I think that on the other end, when people transition, they'll have less friction in the transition coming out of the military when they retire. And then some of those leaders that retire will be able to reinvest some of their knowledge and skills and abilities back into the next generation through mentoring and, taking a mentor protege position to support people moving up further into the ranks and the military maintaining its very strong, positively prepared leaders, so we don't have so much toxic leadership in these spaces. So all of those things are going to, again, I go back to the research. We got to figure out, what things are actually working, not just the things that we think are working, and then don't, double down on those things. And so, but I am hopeful and looking forward to seeing, how we as a country can, implement, positive attributes into our military so that the next generation can serve with honor and feel like the work that they're doing makes a difference in the lives of the American citizen.
So I'll take that question actually in kind of reverse order and start with the inclusive policies first, because those policies actually lead to the ability for the military to actually attract a diverse group of people. So first, the importance of inclusive policies. A lack of inclusion sends this message for women, for people of color, LGBTQ individuals, that they are less, that they are other, and this particular message can actually continue to keep them in this mindset of being more vulnerable to higher rates of harassment and assault and lower rates of promotion. It also affects their careers and ultimately their ability to advance and their socioeconomic stability. And so this self-talk that happens with everyone, it's affected by what happens from externally. And so what we have to ensure is that the policies that we enact for not only in the military, but also within the veteran space is that it is an inclusive policy that, one, if you stepped up to wear the uniform, then you've earned and deserve the benefits that you're going to receive. So what can the military do to attract a diverse group of people? I will not say or even feign to speak for what the military should do, but I can speak for what the VA is doing. So Sean said this point earlier that how the military treats their people affects the veterans that come out in the same fashion. how we treat our veterans has a significant role in the recruitment and retention of the military. And because how we treat our veterans has a direct effect in the public's perception for how the nation treats the military after their service, it is on us within the Department of Veterans Affairs, as well as our stakeholders and our partners, to ensure that we are welcoming of all veterans, of families and caregivers, and our survivor beneficiaries, and to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible to ensure that our military workforce has a greater, so that the public has a greater perception of how the nation treats their veterans after their service. To that end, one of the things that VA does is to tailor communication specifically for a veteran population, acknowledging those differences, but also VA ensures that we bring the veteran voices and the various lived experiences within the organization. So we're proud to have one of the most diverse agencies in the administration, and it just kind of goes to show the difference in the shift in mentality of being able to celebrate those differences, those individuals, and having a seat at the table makes sure that your voice is heard and that the population and the constituents that you represent are heard. And I'll say that that is probably one of the best examples of leadership really walking the walk, is ensuring that the people that are at the table are as diverse as the fabric that is America.
I'd like to echo what both Lourdes just offered, as well as BriGette, and try and tie them together. Before I joined the Department of Defense several months ago, I spent a few years looking at, on behalf of Congress, as asked, looking at how America views service to their nation, and got to travel around the country talking to people about that, not just military, but civilian and things such as national service. America doesn't know its military very well at all. And what they do know is often only a slice of it, generally what they see in movies or in books and video games, not to disrespect them, but that's the popular media portrayal. And they don't have an appreciation, the average person, as to all the opportunities, which goes to BriGette's point, all the things that you can do while serving in the US military in uniform. I mean, you can do everything from be a diver at the bottom of the ocean to deal with satellites in space, or go on to become an astronaut. Quite a few of them are actually military officers. You can be a you can learn how to build buildings, as a construction specialist, and you can also work in artificial intelligence. You can work in medicine. You can do the combat specialties. You can work with vehicles. You can work with aircraft. You name it, you can do it. And it's all things that you see in the civilian economy are available in one form or another through the military. You begin those lifelong work history long skills can be imparted, and you can continue your life's journey after serving. That's not really well understood. But at the same time, folks need to know, and their communities who sponsor them, support them, offer them encouragement in the pursuit of their lives, need to understand that people who pursue any of those specialties need to know that they're going to have a fair shot at progressing and advancing and to be able to feel safe and protected while serving their country. And we have to do better at all those things. And I like to think that the leadership has continually over the last several administrations emphasized just that. We now have a defense equity task force set up by the Deputy Secretary of Defense. And here it's not just DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's also accessibility. That A is the most important thing. You can be in, but do you feel like you have the chance to promote and be all that you can really be when properly supported? That's become a new emphasis as part of the overall DEI appreciation. The Secretary of Defense has reiterated his support for the inclusion of LGBTQ service members after the 10th anniversary of the implementation of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. All the arrows are pointing in the right direction, but that doesn't mean we can stop carrying through and stop focusing on those things, because as we've all said, it takes years and generations to implement these things and make them part of the culture, that they're not countercultural or strange or new, but they're part of who we as a Department of Defense and as all three of us military members are proud of the force as it's evolved. It's not just back in my day, but oh my gosh, look at where we are now. That's why so many of our veterans are actually real leaders of that change for what happens inside the active duty force. And I'm proud to be a part of that to a certain extent while serving as an Assistant Secretary of Defense.
Great. Well, it looks like we have time for probably about one more question. And I wanted to ask you specifically, Deshauna. So you mentioned you were crowned Miss USA in 2016. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about what drew you to the pageant world, or if you've always been involved, and how that experience kind of either mirrors or contrasts your experience as a woman in the military?
Thank you for that question. So what drew me to competing in pageants was I was 19 years old and a pageant recruiter actually recruited me. So it was a random chance of luck that this person saw something in me that at the time I didn't see in myself. And I think pageantry really just intrigued me. Again, coming from a military family, my father and my mother, I didn't grow up in the most feminine households. This household didn't have the dresses and the makeup and the pretty hair. So, you know, I did not have a opportunity to be able to access that portion of myself, which is the girly girl. I did not get that. So pageantry was kind of an outlet. It was a way for me to be able to just really experience a different side of myself. And I don't know if there's a lot of similarities when it comes to pageantry in the military, I will say. One thing I will say is the top common denominator is probably just the fitness aspect of it. Being physically fit and having a healthy lifestyle, something that is valued within the military and valued within pageantry. So that was the spot where I thrived, was the physical fitness portion of it. And then maybe just the communication. You know, we have Q&A when it comes to Miss USA and pageants in general. You have a lot of those viral moments where a young woman will be asked a question and, you know, she may not do so well in terms of answering it. So we value communication. We value being able to be a representative of a larger space, of a larger organization or a larger being. Being Miss USA, you are representing the country nationally. And when you go on to compete at Miss Universe, you are representing the United States of America against, you know, over 80 other countries. The same thing kind of applies, in my opinion, when it comes to being a soldier. You're representing the uniform. You're representing what the uniform stands for. So there is that that piece where you want to make sure that you're always a positive representation of the uniform, you're a positive representation of the sash. So I think that when I started competing in pageantry, I'd already understood the ins and outs of being an honorable, integrity-driven person and being very put together when I represent these two pieces or these two entities. So I think that's probably the bigger alignment in the two. And then probably the biggest difference is the when you're in uniform as a woman, you want to be just as good as the guys. Like the goal is to make sure that there is no difference in what he's able to do and what I'm able to do. That when we walk out and we're in a combat situation, that he trusts me just as much as I trust him. So it's kind of like be just as tough as him, just as tough as the guys within your unit. You don't want to look like you're incapable of being able to handle what's placed in front of you. Whereas with, you know, pageantry, that's not necessarily what we're thinking about. We're thinking about looking our best. We're thinking about, you know, being on these red carpets and in these photo shoots and being very put together and being just a beauty queen and really just being alluring and being able to show what it feels like to be an American beauty. So the priorities in itself are a little bit different. But there are some foundational portions of pageantry in the military that definitely aligns, and I'm happy that I was able to use my platform as Miss USA and a soldier to be able to show that we are capable of doing anything, that even if two entities are on the opposite sides of this colorful scheme, that there's still some alignment, that you can be two things, even if they don't necessarily match. So it really is just showing the versatility of an individual. And I believe that after my time serving, I've seen a lot more pageant girls that have gone into very male-dominated spaces, including the military, and they don't necessarily feel a fear of being able to interact in both spaces.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to have this important conversation.
Thank you so much to our panelists and everyone who joined us today. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Raytheon Technologies, for making this event possible. We hope you'll join us in December for our next summit, where we'll be discussing what it will take to create a more equitable internet for all. If you want to be among the first to hear details about our events, sign up now for free at 19thnews.org/subscribe. And a final thanks to the thousands of members who support our nonprofit newsroom. Your contributions make conversations like today's possible. If you're not a member yet, you can show your support today by donating at 19thnews.org/membership. We look forward to welcoming you to the 19th family, and we'll see you at our next event.